Moyle appears to be saying that in this case, some of the delay was caused because all the committee's resources were being taken up on 2 other studies. The second question, and the most important, is where the onus of proof should lie as far as the government is concerned. Mr. Moyle appears to be saying that even when there is some evidence to suggest that a drug might be dangerous, the government cannot act until it's proved that it's dangerous, or at the very least unhelpful. The third question is whether or not the government is giving the right kind of advice to drug companies in such situations, in the form of laying down guidelines on how they should react when doubts are raised about any particular drug. But these events also raise serious questions for the drug companies, questions which were reflected in the debate which went on inside Shearing. The first concerns the balance between risks and benefits. If there is a viable and safe alternative available, should a company continue to market a drug about which doubts have been raised? The second, once again, concerns the onus of proof. Once serious doubts have been raised about the safety of any drug, is it up to the company concerned to prove that it's safe, or is it up to others, including the government, to prove that it's not? But the story of hormone pregnancy tests doesn't end in 1975. We shall be back to see what happened after that date in just a moment. But first, the break.
The London Programme, Part 2, production number 22561, date recorded the 13th of April 1978, take 1.
Welcome back. As we saw in Part 1, the government finally issued a warning to all doctors not to prescribe hormone pregnancy tests in 1975, 8 years after Dr. Gall had first suggested that there might be a link between these drugs and deformities in children. But that wasn't the end of the story. For a start, Professor Dukes believes that hormone pregnancy tests are still being used in some countries to this day.
To my knowledge, they are still being advocated in certain countries, at least outside Europe, for this particular purpose.
We asked Professor Dukes why he thought this was so.
Well, of course, drug companies are not homogeneous entities. They have a lot of independence within their organization, and I can quite imagine that different companies within the same organization have a different point of view. Let me go back to one essential point. We are talking about evidence here, which, in my view, is very convincing at the present time, which remains circumstantial evidence. One can argue for and against that evidence, and quite obviously there are people, quite conscientious people in the drug industry, who still disbelieve this evidence.
But equally worrying is the fact that even after the government's yellow warning that these tests should not be used, many doctors in this country continued to prescribe them. Last October, the magazine General Practitioner revealed that hormone pregnancy tests had been prescribed 8,000 times over the previous year, long after the official yellow warning had been issued. Shearing, the manufacturers of Primodos, were quoted by the magazine as having said they were horrified by this information. A month after this report was published, the Committee on the Safety of Medicine issued a second yellow warning to doctors. By this time, the final results of their research were available, and they confirmed the preliminary findings. This second warning said,
"The committee therefore reiterate their view, expressed in their earlier warning, that hormonal tests for pregnancy should not be used."
However, even this second warning doesn't seem to have been fully effective. Dr. Colin Brewer is a consultant with the British Pregnancy Advisory Bureau. After the second yellow warning, he carried out further research to see whether doctors were still prescribing hormone pregnancy tests.
I heard from various colleagues of mine that they were still seeing patients, even in the months after the issue of the latest yellow warning from the Committee on the Safety of Medicines, who had received hormonal pregnancy tests. So it seemed worthwhile to do a largish survey to find out just how widespread the problem was.
Can you explain, what you did and what the results were?
Well, I asked colleagues at about half a dozen BPAS branches around the country if they would ask the first 100 patients whom they saw in the months of December and January, that's about 2 months after issuing the warning, whether they had received from their GPs or from any other doctor during that most recent pregnancy anything in the way of a hormonal pregnancy test. And we found that on average about 2 out of 100 of each of those patients had received hormonal pregnancy tests.
So why have doctors continued to prescribe these, in your opinion?
Well, I think doctors, like everyone else, are creatures of habit, and these tests were very widely used until about the last 10 years. And clearly some doctors are more reluctant to change their habits than others.
But shouldn't it be perhaps one of the first priorities of a doctor to actually read the yellow warnings?
Well, for the 2,000 or 3,000 years, it is supposed to have been one of the cardinal principles of medicine that first you must do no harm. But clearly a lot of people have not taken this warning seriously, and it's much older than the Committee on the Safety of Medicines.
This evidence shows quite clearly that the yellow warning system isn't working effectively. It seems that many doctors don't read the warnings, even though only 16 have been issued since the time the system was set up. We asked the Minister, Roland Moyle, whether he was satisfied with the yellow warning system.
There are weaknesses in the yellow warning system. That's why I've put out a new scheme for following up drugs and testing them for consultation within the last few months, and we hope to improve on it. If I had no actual evidence that Primados is being still prescribed by doctors. If it is, I'd like to know about it, because then I think we'd want to take further action to persuade the last remnants of the medical profession to stop doing this.
So the events since 1975 raise another very important question for the government, and that quite simply is, does the yellow warning system actually work? All the evidence in this case seems to suggest quite clearly that it does not. Earlier this year, the last drug which could be used as a hormone pregnancy test was discontinued. Amenarone 40 had been withdrawn from the market in 1976, and in January, Shearing decided to discontinue supplies of Primados. The company told us last week that this was because the product was no longer commercially viable. But the drug is still available in some chemists. Again, this is not the end of the story of hormone pregnancy tests. In February, the Association for Children Damaged by Hormone Pregnancy Tests was launched. The association had its origins in one small event which took place nearly 2 years ago. Daniel Williams was born in 1975 with a serious heart condition. His mother, Val Williams, is now chairman of the association. She believes she was prescribed a hormone pregnancy test in 1974 when she was pregnant with Daniel. At that time, there was no warning on the packet. 2 years later, in 1976, she was prescribed the same drug again, but this time there was a warning which said not to be taken during pregnancy. Mrs. Williams was greatly disturbed by this. She began to campaign for action. Gradually, other parents in the same predicament joined her. They included Raymond and Sheila Hyman, who read about the campaign in The Sun.
Well, when I rang The Sun, they said that Jack Ashley was doing a campaign for these sort of children from the tablets. So he gave me the name and address of Jack Ashley to write to him. So we wrote to him and received a letter back saying, will we get in touch with Mrs. Williams? She was doing it for the London area. And from there was the meeting at the House of Commons.
That meeting, organised by Jack Ashley, took place in February. The parents of about 15 damaged children turned up and formed the Association for Children Damaged by Hormone Pregnancy Tests.
Well, since that meeting, we've had over 300 parents who have actually made contact with the association with various abnormalities, children born with abnormalities.
And are they still coming in?
And they're still coming in every day. You know, my phone at times never stops ringing, and my secretary, who's even more overworked than myself, is really doing a tremendous job in actually keeping a record of all the parents, what's wrong with the children, and sending out newsletters. We've already sent out to letters to our parents to actually keep them informed of what's going on and what we intend to do in the future.
The association was set up with 4 main aims. First, they wanted any remaining drugs taken off the market. As it happens, a few days later, Shearing announced that they were to stop selling Primados. Secondly, they wanted to help as many parents as they could whose children might have been damaged by the drug. Within weeks, their numbers grew into the hundreds, and all parents are now receiving advice and regular newsletters. Thirdly, they wanted to bring the plight of these children to the attention of the public and of the authorities. This means publicity, and they're beginning to get it. Finally, they wanted to get compensation for the children. Jack Ashley also wants a public inquiry into the whole affair.
I think the inquiry is necessary to see if any significant number of children have been unnecessarily damaged by hormone pregnancy test drugs. And there is a great deal of evidence from the parents which indicates that many children have been so damaged by those drugs, and an inquiry should establish whether that is the case or not. And it's no excuse for the minister to say that there is no direct proof of damage. The fact that a prima facie case has been made out is sufficient for an inquiry. I think it's very important to uncover what has actually happened by the use of the hormone pregnancy test drug to see if any lessons can be learned for the future.
Public inquiries involve a great deal of time, effort and money, and I don't think that there's anything that the public inquiry would reveal which is not already common knowledge.
So Health Minister Roland Moyle disagrees with Jack Ashley, but he is willing to discuss the issue with a delegation of parents from the association.
Well, if they've got any fresh evidence, I'm always willing to keep an open mind on the subject, and I will obviously look at it again. The last thing I want to do is to get into a situation where we've got a closed mind on these matters.
So if the association came to you with fresh evidence, you would be willing to possibly consider an inquiry or something like that?
I'd be willing to consider their fresh evidence, certainly, and then to consider my action afresh after that.
So it's possible that there may still be a public inquiry into this particular issue. But taking a wider view, the plight of these children and their evident need for some kind of financial help raises another very important issue, one which affects all of us, not just the drug companies or the government. Under our present system, these children can't get any compensation unless either the government gives it to them or they take the drug company concerned to court. But many people are now arguing that this system is inadequate and inappropriate to meet this sort of problem. This argument was highlighted by the recent report of the Pearson Commission, the Royal Commission on Civil Liability and Compensation for Personal Injury, which was published last month. In the section dealing with damage caused to children before their birth, the report mentioned a number of problems which would face any child trying to gain compensation. First, in nearly every case, it would be difficult to ascertain the cause of any deformity. In other words, it's nearly always very difficult to establish that a particular drug caused a particular deformity. This problem is likely to arise in the particular case which we've been looking at tonight, mainly because the children who might have been damaged by hormone pregnancy tests suffer from a wide range of medical problems, from heart disease to cleft palates. Shearing, the manufacturers of Primados, have themselves raised this point. They told us,
"We deny that there is any proof that Primados could have damaged an unborn fetus. There is no specific type or pattern of abnormality. All the abnormalities alleged to have been caused by Primados also occur spontaneously."
The Shearing statement went on to say,
"It is unreasonable to expect one person to compensate another until it is clear that he has caused that other some harm. We are, of course, deeply sympathetic with all the parents of deformed children, and especially when they believe that something that the mother took in pregnancy might be the cause, since this adds to their grief."
In their report, the Pearson Commission went on to say that at present, in the rare cases where the cause of the deformity could be established, the child would still have to prove that there'd been negligence on the part of the company concerned. This, too, would often be very difficult. The Commission also mentioned two very practical problems which could confront any damaged child who might seek some compensation. They talked about the delay which might be caused by lengthy legal proceedings. Clearly, this might prevent help being given to the child at the time it was most needed. And they mentioned the expense which would be involved in going to court. This could be especially high if the action were difficult or complicated. For someone like Raymond Hyman, living on a milkman's pay, going to court would be a very real problem. But naturally, he wants to get whatever help he can for his son.
I think we should get what we can for our son. Because if he has the operation and everything goes all right, it's still only a form of correctiveness. And we've tried since he's been born to get him insured for different little things. And the insurance companies just don't want to know. So I think to myself, what is going to happen if everything goes all right and he should get married or that? He's never going to be able to get insurances. He'll never be able to get a mortgage to buy an house or anything. So I think that whatever we can get for him will be for his benefit.
In order to resolve the kind of difficulties which confront people like Raymond Hyman, and so to help children in the same position as his son, the Pearson Commission recommended a very important change in the law. They recommended that in cases where a child had been damaged by a drug before birth, there should be what's called strict liability on the drug manufacturer to pay compensation. This would mean that the child or his parents wouldn't have to prove negligence on the part of the drug company. Indeed, it wouldn't matter if the company could prove that they weren't negligent. All that would have to be established is that the drug caused the deformity. And in legal terms, this would mean showing that the balance of probability was that the drug had done so. This could obviously make legal proceedings in such cases quicker and cheaper. But such a measure might also have a wider effect. Its supporters hoped that it would encourage drug companies and the government to take stronger measures to ensure that any particular drug was safe. Few companies, the argument goes, would be willing to take the risk of continuing to sell a drug whose safety had once been questioned. It remains to be seen whether or not the government will accept the recommendation of the Pearson Committee, but it's clear that there's a growing belief that something must be done to help children such as the ones we've seen tonight, not just for the children's sake, but also to lighten the burden which their parents have to bear.